OCO, hello. Welcome everyone to Indigenizing Disability Justice. So excited to see so many people here in this space tonight with us, as well as online. So I want to give a special shout out to our community partners on Ohlone lands, known as Oakland, California, who are doing a watch party right now, as well as the other people joining us from around the world. So, yay. So I am Jen Water. I am the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I am multiply disabled, queer, and a journalist and organizer. I live here on Piscataway lands, originally though from what is known as Oklahoma. I'm going to give a brief image description of myself for those who may not be able to see me. So I am a light complected, native, two-spirit woman. I have brown hair, black glasses. I'm wearing a blue keffiyeh, a purple t-shirt, and a yellow ribbon skirt with hummingbirds on it and yellow moccasins. So I want to acknowledge that we're currently on the ancestral lands of the Nacotchtank and the Piscataway people. These lands and their caretakers are significantly older than the so-called United States or Washington, D.C. I want to honor those that came before us, those who are with us now, and all of our future ancestors. We wouldn't be here without those that came before us, and we must think about how our actions today impact those that will come after us. However, land acknowledgements will never be enough. Crushing colonialism demands the return of all lands to the rightful indigenous nations of those lands. This also includes Palestinian lands. As we stand with the Palestinian people who are suffering a genocide that is being wholeheartedly supported through a variety of measures that include supplying munitions, financial aid, and state surveillance and violence by many of the very people who work in this city. None of us are free until we're all free. So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about our organization. So Crushing Colonialism is an Indigenous-led nonprofit in the so-called United States that uplifts Indigenous people through traditional storytelling, which includes arts, media, and journalism. I founded the organization in 2016, and we are operated by Indigenous people working in a variety of storytelling fields across the world. We work to increase the pay and employment of Indigenous storytellers while also promoting their work and increasing access to professional representation. We produce international reporting and organizing to inform and empower marginalized community members to create professional opportunities and advocate for the just funding and employment of Indigenous storytellers. In doing this, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. So I'll give you a little brief rundown about some of the programming we have before we get started. Let me also, I apologize, I did not give a little housekeeping. So this is Billy. He is our ASL interpreter. And I apologize, I realize I did not ask for pronouns. In the back, we have some food and drinks because we don't want to make assumptions about people's dietary possible concerns. We try to keep everything well labeled and separate with its own separate tongs and foods and such. The restrooms are outside. I think that's it. Oh. We have a table over here, the welcome table, where you can sign up for our email. You can get t-shirts, buttons, stickers. We also have magazines and some informational little one-page sheets back there as well. So since I mentioned the magazine, I'll let you all know about that. I see some of you have it. So the magazine takes an Indigenous lens to worldly issues like disability justice, women's rights, Afro-Indigeneity, the arts, and 2S LGBTQIA+ issues. The magazine is an international quarterly publication available in both a hard copy and a digital version in both English and Spanish. The digital version is free, and for the hard copy, we offer currently up to 400 free copies to our Indigenous relatives who are on the other side of the digital divide, meaning they can't easily access our online content. Our publication is also available for purchase. You can subscribe online. If you also sign up for our email list, you'll definitely find out about every digital edition that comes out. You can always look at our website, crushingcolonialism.org. And we ship internationally, and we've even started a small test pilot to get the magazine into jails and prisons as well. The other thing we have going on, really big exciting stuff, especially for those of you that are here in so-called Washington, D.C., is our Decolonized Beats Indigenous World Pride programming. I just call it DBIWP for short. So it is multi-year programming happening that we're so happy to announce tonight. We actually have someone here with us who is a part of this over there. So Decolonized Beats Indigenous World Pride is an international Indigiqueer-led multi-year event and programming series culminating with 2 weeks of events, May 23rd to June 8th, 2025, here in so-called Washington, D.C., to be held at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. That's right, queer natives from around the world are taking over a Smithsonian. The event and media series celebrates the work of 2S, LGBTQIA+, and more Indigenous storytellers, artists, and performers. And we actually had a kickoff event on Treaty 1 territory, known as Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, on August 11th, 2023, and that is available to watch on our website or our YouTube channel. As part of the DBIWP programming, we actually have right now an application open for 5 queer Indigenous youth from anywhere in the world, ages 18 to 25, to learn and produce a 5 to 10 minute film over the course of 4 months. It's 1 2-hour workshop a month for 4 months, being led by Theo Cuthand and Fallon Smart, who are both Indigenous Two-Spirit trans filmmakers from so-called Canada. At the end of the training, every student will be paid $500 US. We will also, if they are able to travel, fly them in here to DC, screen their movies, and have them take part in a moderated conversation after. Because while we're here to support the folks already doing storytelling, we want to make sure that everyone who wants to do this work has opportunities. And so the application process is open until May 31st. There's information on our website and our social media accounts. It's just a couple of short questions that can be emailed to us in like a typed written form, audio or video. And we will take and work with anyone who speaks any language. You don't have to speak English. We just have to know ahead of time so that we can ensure we have translators. And we will accept applications in other languages and have them translated. So good stuff that we're doing. And then one last thing to mention, we've actually relaunched our website, crushingcolonialism.org. And on it is a shop. We're still doing a little work on this, but we are partnering with Indigenous artists, paying them for original designs that we then sell on our shop for merchandise. And we promote their work and put the information out about who these wonderful artists are. We have 3 designs currently up. 2 of them, we have stickers and buttons over on the welcome table. And we have a new design coming out next month. So watch the website and our socials. Once again, sign up for the email list if you can. And of course, as a very small nonprofit, we always rely on donations and help and support from community members We are one of the only Indigenous nonprofits in this country producing original content and supporting our Indigenous storytellers, journalists, and artists that is committed to the principles of disability and language justice. We are happy to do these things, but they are very costly. So if you are able to give, please give. You can go on our website to do so, and you can even set up a monthly, quarterly, or annual donation. And with that, I'm gonna bring Angela up here in a minute. I feel like I've been talking to you all a great deal. Before we bring Angela up though, I want to talk a little bit about tonight's event and why it's so important and why I'm so excited that we're doing this. So this is in collaboration with Sacred Earth Solar, No More Silence, and I also want to say, in case I forget, thank you to Woolly Mammoth, who gave us this space and their staff for free. So, woo! So why we're here? The Centers for Disease Control has found that 30%, meaning 1 in 3 American Indian and Alaskan Native adults have a disability, and that Native people overall are 50.3% more likely to have a disability when compared to the national average. That's the highest of any other ethnic or racial group in the so-called US. The British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability has found that 30 to 35% of Indigenous people in so-called Canada have a disability. And in fact, anywhere that I've been able to find data in the English language, studies always find that the rates of disabilities or certain illnesses are the highest for Indigenous peoples. We also suffer some of the most direct effects of the climate crisis and environmental degradation, as well as violence at the hands of the colonizers. So I want to tell you quickly what disability justice is, in case some of you are not familiar with this term. Naomi Ortiz, a writer, poet, facilitator, and visual artist, defines disability justice as the cross-disability framework that values access, self-determination, and expectation of difference. An expectation of difference means that we expect difference in disability, identity, and culture. To be included and part of society is about being able to be our whole selves, including all of our identities. Disability justice includes space for self-care, reflection, and hard discussions. The fabulous Patty Byrne, who is the co-founder and executive director of SINS Invalid, and one of those people whose work and words have informed the creation of this term of disability justice. Patty has said that it is a framework that was a reaction to the ways that the US disability rights movement, quote, invisibilized the lives of people who lived in intersection junctures of oppression. Disabled people of color, immigrants with disabilities, queers with disabilities, trans and gender nonconforming people with disabilities who are houseless, people with disabilities who are incarcerated, people with disabilities who have their ancestral land stolen, amongst others. We simply cannot demand and build a world rooted in decolonization and disability justice without having deaf, disabled, and ill Indigenous people leading us in this work. And I am so excited that we're able to have these conversations with our Indigenous relatives across borders, lands, and oceans, as well as to have our non-Indigenous or able-bodied neighbors and friends and community members here with us in this conversations and doing the work as we rebuild the world that we all deserve. There is so much that we can all learn from each other and how we can support each other. So with that, I'm going to introduce Angela. So Angela Miracle Ledoux, also known as Lunacy or Miss Chief Raka, is a Plains Creek powwow dancer and bead girl and beadwork artist from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Angela started cultural dancing, Métis, and powwow at age 6 and continued her dance career as a hip hop dance artist since 2003. She has been invited to perform, teach, and speak to countless countries throughout the world since 2016 and has toured the world as one of the lead dancers for the Halusai Nation. More recently, she was selected for the 2023-2024 cohort for the Kennedy Center Cultural Caucus and has been invited to teach and perform at the Kennedy Center on multiple occasions. I could go on and on with her bio, but I'm just going to read a couple of highlights here. She has choreographed and performed at the 2017 Juno Awards, has won first place at the Canadian Hip Hop Challenges and World Hip Hop Challenge, and World Hip Hop Championship bronze medalist. She has also, Angela's done so much. She has also opened for major recording artists such as TLC, Sean Paul, Lil Kim, Grandmaster Flash, and Busta Rhymes, to name a few. So, with that said, I'm going to stop speaking at y'all and let her come up and do her thing.
Hello, Tanse. And this dance I started doing in 2018. I'm a fancy shawl dancer, but this dance here is really special. The hoop dance, which is a traditional, ceremonial, and healing dance that originated from the Taos Pueblo tribe of New Mexico. And I learned how to do this dance through my friend Sage Romero, who is from that tribe, and he gifted me with my first set of hoops. And just started teaching me, how to do a little 1-2. And then my friend Lisa OJ, she's from the Pemmican First Nation, taught me this foundation that you're about to see here today. So this is also a storytelling dance that shows how we're all connected in the circle of life. So you might see shapes like animals, mountains, the super traditional Mickey Mouse. No. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. I'm just going to do a rendition of the traditional dance.
We good now? Okay, so I'm gonna introduce our filmmakers and speakers for the evening. Sorry, we're having. So Audrey Lovely is a European settler and indigenous ancestry. She grew up an army brat between Calgary, Alberta, and Germany. As a young adult, she lived in Europe for 16 years. She studied, worked, and became a part of anti-authoritarian social movements fighting racism, fascism, and gender-based violence in Germany, France, and Italy. She returned to Turtle Island in 1998 and has been involved in anti-colonial struggles in British Columbia and Ontario ever since. Audrey is a licensed paralegal who works with survivors of violence at Aboriginal Legal Services. She is a filmmaker and storyteller and the co-founder of No More Silence, working with other Indigenous women, trans, and Two-Spirit people to end gender-based violence and colonization. Terry Montour. So Terry Montour, and I apologize, I realized we asked how to pronounce this, is a Mohawk Wood Clan member who has recently returned home from living in Toronto for over 40 years to 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. She is currently working as a mobile crisis rapid response team technician at the 6 Nations Crisis Hub, which aims to provide immediate crisis response to mental health incidents on the 6 Nations territory in an attempt to divert these people in crisis from unnecessary police interactions and get them linked to specific services on the territory. Prior to this, she was a union staff representative with Canadian Media Guild, which represents workers at various media organizations like CBC and APTN. She is also a member of the No More Silence Collective, and she hosts the Ron Hummingbird Healing Lodge and her family's property on the territory. She is also a member of Protect the Tract, a project of the Haudenosaunee Hereditary Chiefs Council that brings awareness to the environmental and cultural duties the Haudenosaunee still hold over the Haldimand Tract and the Grand River watershed in southern Ontario, Canada. And then with us virtually is Melina Laupacount Massimo, who we will show here on the screen in a minute. Melina is Lubicon Cree and was born in her community of Little Buffalo in northern Alberta. She has worked on social, environmental, and climate justice issues for the past 20 years. Melina is the founder of Sacred Earth, co-founder of Indigenous Climate Action, and the inaugural Indigenous Research Fellow at the David Suzuki Foundation, where her research focused on climate change, Indigenous knowledge, and renewable energy. She is the host of a TV series called Power to the People, which profiles sustainable climate solutions from renewable energy, food security to eco-housing in Indigenous communities across Canada. In 2021, Melina was named one of the 26 climate champions in Canada by the Canada Climate Law Initiative, and she received the Canadian Eco Hero Award in 2019. Melina has written for a variety of publications and produced numerous short films on climate change, environmental justice, just transition, water issues, energy sovereignty, and Indigenous cultural revitalization. She has also worked on the issues of murdered and missing Indigenous women since 2013, after the suspicious death of her sister Bella, whose case still remains unsolved. And unfortunately, Wanda Whitebird is unable to join us tonight, but her presence is missed immensely. Wanda's spirit and contributions to our communities in this world are valuable beyond the words that I can muster here. I'm just gonna read her bio real quick, and then I'm gonna let Audrey tell us about the films we're about to watch. So Wanda Whitebird is of the Bear Clan, is a member of the Puctinet Mi'kmaq Nation in Nova Scotia. She currently resides in Toronto and has been active with No More Silence for 2 decades. Wanda is known for her groundbreaking work, bringing the drum and traditional Indigenous spirituality into prisons. She was also one of the first elders to embrace a harm reduction approach to working with substance users. She was recently honored with the Casey House Award for Social Justice and recognized for her years of work with Indigenous people living with HIV and AIDS. So we'll let Audrey here. We're about to watch 2 films. We'll let Audrey just kind of set us up and tell us a bit about them before we screen them.
Okay, thank you so much. Welcome, and thank you all for coming out tonight. It's amazing to be in a room with people. This is the first event that we've had since COVID, since the pandemic, with people in the room. Woo-hoo. Awesome. Of course, we're very sad that one does not know us. The first one we're going to see is about one's journey, beginning of a journey that has progressed since this film was made. And we will talk about that in the second film a little bit, and more when we're in our discussion. We collaborated with the Center for Independent Living in Toronto on a project during COVID, which we had initiated before the pandemic, and that ended up being a virtual project. Initially, we were reaching out to Indigenous community members with access barriers to find out what are the issues that you face when you're trying to participate in culture and ceremony. And then we ended up having to do that over Zoom. And in some weird ways, virtual does mean accessibility to a lot of people who previously couldn't participate. So we ended up having more people, I think, join these listening sessions that we did than we would have had if we had just done them the old way, in a room. So basically, that's what this New World is about. It really was a new world for us to work with that technology. The second film was in collaboration with Sacred Earth Solar and Melina. We've had a long relationship. I've known Melina for many years as a friend. Previously, I used to live in Vancouver, as I mentioned. But sadly, I met the whole family with Bella's sister was murdered in Toronto. to have seen any justice or truth around that. It happened in 2013. And Melina, as you've heard, is a climate warrior and collaborated with us on solarizing the property where Terry hosts the Rama Healing Lodge. So those are two short films that we're going to watch now.
Do you have a microphone for people who are hard of hearing or whose hearing aids aren't working well?
We can get one.
Thank you so much.
Speaking loudly.
Better sound. So like we had technical difficulties in the film, we're still in that world where we are having, it doesn't always just work. As great as technology is, we're always still having our challenges with it. I'll just wait for some direction from the
All right, so sorry about those technical difficulties. As Audrey said, the films are available online, and when we put this event online, we'll make sure the films are in there properly. But we're actually gonna take a 10-minute break, so that everyone can talk or rest or do whatever you need to do. So we will be back here at 7:10. Is it 7:10? Okay, yeah, so we'll be back at 7:10. All right, thank you.
It's unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I just unmuted it.
Alright. Can you make this larger? How does that work?
Yeah, I don't know. I tried double clicking it. I have no idea how to do that. I'm sorry. I tried double clicking. Like, what if,
Okay, so
it does it every time, like, for a certain period of time.
okay,
Okay, everyone, so we're gonna start coming back together now.
We just have to make sure that we can see them and see him. He's gonna stand like that.
Oh, oh, you mean just
Yeah, just to make sure it's there. In case, otherwise, you just have to keep doing the mute and unmute them.
Cool. Okay. Will do.
Got the live stream going? Good, all right, wonderful, so welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. So we're gonna have a little conversation now with Audrey, Terry, and Melina. So want to start off with Melina and hear from her and the work she does, but I'm curious about how, you know, the community has really welcomed or perhaps not welcomed disability justice. Like, what has that looked like for you all, and how has it looked like, you know, implementing that in native spaces and across movements?
Okay, before Melina jumps in, I guess I can speak to that because Melina's actually not in Toronto. I can say that our work has really been welcomed by folks who experience access barriers. And that's about it. And I can't say that there have been any improvements. I can't say that people are following our lead. That I don't see happening yet. Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly introduce myself in Mohawk because that's what I usually do. Sego Sego Huevo, Terry Montori Gomniak, Gonyego Hage, Wawaho, Oswego Nita Wagano. My name is Terry Montour. I'm Mohawk Wolf Clan from 6 Nations of the Grand River Territory. Basically, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of work in lately in my own community where the lodge is located is trying to bring a sense of harm reduction and disability justice to people in the community. And there's so many barriers there because our people are really strongly influenced by the idea that in order to be well, you can't be on substances. So there's definitely I call it's like an obstacle. People are really, really hesitant to support harm reduction because they feel that it's re-addicting, whereas we're trying to save lives. And so it's really like we really struggle a lot against this colonized Christianity view of how people who are addicted or have accessibility needs need to access ceremony. And so far we've not really had a lot of inroads. In my community, we have the traditional longhouse religion as well, which is a Haudenosaunee, kind of like a cultural revitalization movement that happened in the 1840s. But they're very strongly, there's this belief that you need to be of a good mind, even there's no substances in it. And even things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression and anxiety are seen as not as being an impediment to the good mind. So getting the kind of buy-in in my own community is really difficult. And that's one of the one major stumbling block that I'm facing right now in terms of fully allowing the lodge to be accessed. So that's still something that we're doing. We'll have to be discussion.
Yeah, I know in my own experiences in a lot of Native community in this country, I feel very locked out because of the lack of disability access, as well as just a lot of awareness. Yeah. And we have a lot of work to do still within our communities. So I think this is a really good one for Melina to jump in on. So how did all of how did you all land and come to this place of doing this work on the intersections of climate and our murdered and missing relatives and disability justice? You know, like what has that looked like? How is this all connected? So Melina, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Tanseg wakia, Nia Melina Miawapin Labokam Masmo Nia Nikia Kinaskum Tanawao. My name is Melina. My Cree name is Miawapin, and I come from the Lubukon Cree Nation. And so for me, as somebody that comes from an impacted community where literally my community since I was born has been dealing with environmental racism and extractivism. And I was on a blockade when I was 7 as basically an inheritance of land protection. We see the land as our mother, and, you know, Indigenous peoples. Okay, I'll slow down. Audrey just told me to slow down. Thanks, Audrey. I'm a fast speaker. Because I've had to do climate and energy work and speak really fast in most spaces. And so I'm still teaching myself in my nervous system how to slow back down, and that I can still be heard in spaces. But having to speak in a lot of non-Indigenous spaces has led me to having to speak very quickly to get my points across. As somebody that's impacted from a community where we literally are burdening the shoulder and the cost of extractivism, we have oil, gas, logging, fracking, tar sands. So any type of extractivism you can think. And from that environmental races, from that land degradation, we have many community members, including myself, that have health issues from the extractivism. And what I was just saying quickly earlier was that Mother Earth, you know, Indigenous peoples call Earth our mother, and we see that the abundance and the love and the nourishment and the care that she's extended to us is a responsibility to care, and we have that reciprocal relationship with Mother Earth. And so the climate crisis is an essentially humanity's disconnection from their responsibility to protect Mother Earth. And so these are all interconnected. And even when the first, you know, colonial impact was on our lands, but also towards our women, there was violence against women since 1492. And just like we have seen, even with the story of glamorizing Disney fairy tales like Pocahontas, who was literally one of the first MMIWG people. So we can see that very much there's this impact on land, on our bodies, and on our people. And from the impact on the body, because of trauma, because of colonial impact, we now have also many health issues related to that. And so disability justice comes full circle into this. And even as a climate and energy campaigner and somebody that's worked to protect homelands for 20 years, I still feel very much a judgment and also a gaslighting from the own people that I'm in solidarity with, that are non-Indigenous, that don't have to deal with disability or invisible disability, you know, to the point where I'm called, you know, a delicate flower or you know, a princess because I have pain or I can't do certain things and I have to put up boundaries. And I think that's the thing that unfortunately within our own communities or within movement spaces, we still see very much an ableist way of being because of the ways in which we've been taught as organizers to constantly put the burden on our bodies, and not that self-care and taking care of one another, expecting one another to basically be the sacrificial lambs of our society to pursue justice, to pursue climate, environmental justice, and social justice for our peoples. But yet a lot of times we leave the movement spaces. Many of the people that I've worked with have left movement spaces because of basically having disability and not being respected within our movement spaces, and or deciding to leave the world, deciding to leave their life because they aren't supported in the ways in which we need to support each other. So all of this work is so interconnected and it affects us on a multitude of levels.
Thank you so much. I often can't help but wonder if I didn't grow up around oil and gas and mining and uranium waste, would I have the autoimmune diseases I have? And also, how much better could my health be if I could get the healthcare I needed now and be treated with respect while trying to access it? So when we talk about these things, like, I think we kind of, Melina kind of touched on this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. You know, what are some of the experiences been, Terry and Audrey, doing this work, and like how has it been perceived in that by non-Indigenous people, maybe doing climate work in so-called Canada in these spaces?
I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of our allies who take direction, the ones who take direction are really on it and they understand what we're trying to do. I find that the biggest barrier actually has been our own people. And I think that part of that is around the whole understanding of we're colonized. And when you get colonized, there's a clash between your own Indigenous people's values and what the colonizer expects, right? So there's also that whole stereotype of the very able-bodied noble warrior that we constantly are having to deal with. And the idea that you can still be a warrior and fight for things, even while you're disabled, doesn't seem to get the traction in our own communities as it does outside of our communities. I find that there's a lot more respect and understanding and wanting to get to a place in a lot of our allies and not so much in our own communities. So that's kind of a really interesting focus. And so I look a lot at, you know, how do we build those strengthening relationships so that we can model what we're doing in community so that more people get on board with what we're trying to do. And like I said, I found the biggest supporters are my non-Indigenous friends. Like they are all like, wow, that's amazing work. This is cutting edge stuff you're doing. And my own family and friends are kind of like, huh? Why are you expending energy on something that just seems so, why? But the reality is that all of us have done it at some point. If we live long enough, we're going to have to stop. I mean, my knees are giving out. It's been, you know, I find myself going, wow, knees are really important. And that means that you can't access things the way I used to. I also have kidney issues, and it's an ongoing battle with that. And I know that as I get older, getting into things that are, you know, that I want to do are going to be more and more of a challenge. So it's really important for me as a person to try and expand the idea of how do we deal with this? How do we access ceremony for people who are disabled? How do we be in a community where we are getting more and more disabled people and yet there's still this stigma against it? And how do we break through that obstacle of like, we're supposed to be this thing when the reality is we're not? Colonization has done a number on us. And so that is part and parcel of what we're trying to undo. And that's what decolonization is for me, is like understanding that these intersections of climate justice, disability justice, getting our land back, they're all related and we all have to like figure out how we're going to support that overarching goal of making sure that our people are liberated and that all people we spent some time today at the Black History Museum and I was overwhelmed at that. Like, that was an incredible understanding. I learned things that I didn't know. And I think it was really important to see what colonialism is. Make no mistake, slavery is a colonial project. And what it has done to these lands right? Because you bring people over who are disconnected from their homelands. What does that mean for these lands here? What does that mean for all of us going forward? How do we get into a place where we are all liberated? And for me, that was really important. I'm really glad we went here today. I felt that it enhanced my understanding of what liberation actually is. So I want to acknowledge my Black relatives who are all here on Turtle Island, because we share some of the same struggles and the same understanding that we are not free until all of us are free. And I think that that's really where the justice piece, we work for that as an overarching idea around how we're doing things. It's not just for the disabled people in our communities, it's for everyone. And if we can model this on a bigger scale, we're doing the work of crushing colonialism. Come on.
It actually brings to mind, I was just on Ohlone Lands, which is San Francisco Bay Area last week, and I went to the the Black Panther Party Museum. And I went in knowing a fair amount, but they did so many amazing things. Like they took part in the 504 sit-ins, which is a very crucial part of disability history. They went and met with the Zapatistas in so-called Mexico. You know, they ran ambulances taking community members to and from doctors' appointments. Like they did so much great stuff. And these are things we need in our communities now. Audrey, I'd love to hear you talk about like, some of the work of No More Silence and what you all have been doing.
Well, we would aspire to be doing the greatness of the Black Panther Party for sure. But what we definitely share is this understanding of like just basic meeting communities' needs, like empowering our community is the focus. Like, I think it's important to know that No More Silence works outside all colonizer institutions. We're turning 20 this coming summer. We never incorporated, we're not for-profit. We've always just remained, you know, we have a bank account, they give us bank account. Every time we put too much money in there, we get calls from the money laundering clients. And why would you transfer $146 from No More Silence account to Audrey Huntley's account? We need to know. Well, there were some posters that I reimbursed myself, but it's that level of but yeah, like we started around missing and murder. I've always understood the systemic reasons for the missing and the murdered, which is colonization and genocide, attempted genocide. It even, you know, it's actually come to a national inquiry in so-called Canada, where the final report also named genocide. So we've been part of a movement for 20 years that has shifted the narrative to that point. So we're really proud of that. But we have to mention, of course, the grannies and the aunties from Vancouver's downtown east side, who've been doing this work way longer even than us. We mentioned the strawberry ceremony where we gather in front of police headquarters every year. This was our 19th year. You saw Wanda was joining us from our hospital bed. You might have noticed how cold the people looked because like it's Canada and it's sometimes minus, oh, I don't know what that is, but that's not. It's really cool. So, but we do that, and that started in Vancouver with the Memorial March. They started 30 years ago when a woman's dismembered body was found on Palestine, and the family wanted to pick Valentine's Day as a day to just show love. And it was not a protest; it was about condolence and grieving for the community. And that's what we center to. Like we do it at police headquarters because we want to underline state complicity, police inaction, they over police and under protect, and we want them abolished. Like, yes. No deep fun, but just abolished. So it's always been about like love, like just showing love for community, and disability justice is a natural extension of that. The other important thing about No More Silence is that we're always about building our network, so that's why we're here. we've never really built a network with the folks across the medicine line. We have been to Palestine. I've been to Palestine 3 times. And today we have to remember the Nakba, which started on May 15th. And shamefully in Toronto, they raised the Israeli flag. Our allies were there to counter protest that, but heavily policed. Yeah, settler, what did you say, settler colonials will hang together and people support each other, right? And it is classic, those settler colonial parallels that we see in South Africa and Palestine here. So we're always trying to build those networks. We've visited Oaxaca, Colombia, and now we're here. Disability justice is the latest focus for us as we age and as our members, you know, one day you saw had a spinal cord injury, and then we realized just how ableist our own practice has been, right? And we don't claim to be free of that. You know, if anything, I've learned how fraught this process is. And as much as I love the slogan, nobody left behind, we don't always make it. You know, one is not here. And I'm really sad. And I wish we had been able to do the map, move the map that we would have needed to. And yet, we face an extremely ableist, capitalist, racialized capital society that does not value bodies that aren't productive, that you know, in their view, are disposable. Yeah. So you can't fly. You know, airplanes haven't got together to just take out a seat so that our heritage go there. You know, and all those barriers, and yet we have to aspire. We have to aspire to that. Nobody left behind, as much as we can.
I was fortunate enough to go to Palestine in 2018 with No More Silence. We had a project called Indigenous Land Defense Across the Border. So we wanted to go to Palestine and see what they do. And I think that for me was like a lot of the beginnings of how I wanted to view disability justice, because when we were there, we were in this community called Al-Aqsa, and it means the obstacle. And it was a Palestinian community in the Jericho Valley, and it was basically surrounded on all sides by Israeli settlements, but they were doing their own thing. They built their houses in their own styles. They were growing herbs and making yogurt, doing things that they've been doing in their lands for millennia, growing olive trees and all other things. The leader of their village was a man in a wheelchair who had been paralyzed by an Israeli sniper bullet when he was 16 in the first week of and he was patient and wise and amazing. And I was like, we need to be cultivating leadership wherever it is and however it appears and however it comes to us. And one of the things that he said that I still remember from the translator, he was like, we just do our own thing and they have to let us do it because we're still here in our lands. And for me, that has become a real mantra around how I want to do my work. Because at Six Nations of Grand River Territory, we're literally in the western end of our territory from millennia. We're literally still in our own lands. And so we're doing our own thing in our lands, and they can't stop us. We grow our corn, we grow the Three Sisters. We're trying to bring everybody together. We're doing these things that are inherently our traditional ways, modernizing them because as the Haudenosaunee are incredibly pragmatic, we will adapt however we need to in order to survive. And so we're doing these things, and the wider culture around us is still there. We can participate in it when we want to, but this idea of like doing your own thing on your own lands, despite everything, despite colonialism, despite all of these, that was a huge lesson and a huge, I guess, inspiration to continue this work. I mean, that was a fantastic day that we were there. They even had a big mural on their wall that said, "Water is life," and which is also a very much an Indigenous thing that we say all the time. We honor the water. You know, in my language, actually say Ganalokwa Oneganos, meaning we love the water. And that is how I want you to remember that space and that connection between Palestinian resistance and Turtle Island resistance. And so I think it's really important to try to do your thing. I kind of like think that, that old Greenpeace slogan, we're thinking globally, but we're acting locally. And that is how we bring justice into our communities, into our nations, onto the planet again. And that's how we just gotta keep moving.
So I cannot see the screen to see Galena, but I want to offer her the opportunity to jump in and give some thoughts or maybe talk about go in another direction if she would like to.
Oh, I was just so busy listening that I didn't have any, let's see, some of the things that I actually wanted to add to is I feel like, similar to what Terry said earlier around like our Black brothers and sisters and relatives, around kind of that land connection, but also that piece around healing justice. And that's something that alongside disability justice that I think is really important, because I feel like healing justice is almost like, I would hope, a preventative measure, preventative methods, preventative practices. Sorry, I have a dog that's very anxious behind me, because my partner is not home. But the healing justice pieces that can go alongside disability justice as well, because I feel like with disability justice, sometimes we also we have to be proactive and reactive. We have to have them alongside the preventative, because I think a lot of our people, the ACEs, if you think about the ACEs study, and I had about 3 years being able to work with Resba Menakem, who talks about just like somatic abolitionism, which is where because we've become so disembodied with trauma as Indigenous peoples, as BIPOC peoples, that we start, especially from a young age with trauma, we develop, like you said earlier, Jen, these the health issues that we develop from trauma, from environmental racism, from environmental degradation. A lot of these come from early childhood development. And here we are with, high rates of disabilities within our communities. And yet a lot of times our families and our people aren't sorry. I'm going to have to put myself on mute for a second as my partner comes in. I'm just going to pass it back over because we have a very anxious dog at home. I'm sorry. I'm just going to put myself on mute so he doesn't bark in your guys' ears. But I'll come back to my point. I'm just going to pass it back really quick. My apologies.
Thank you. I understand. I have 2 cats at home and one of them loves to Zoom bomb constantly. Thankfully, everyone thinks it's cute. So let's talk a bit about the solar panels and what that has been like. What has the outcome been of putting the solar panels on the Union Lodge? How has this been for community? And what was it also like? Being down here in so-called US, like I can't see firsthand, but I see the photos and the videos, and it really looks like you all have brought a lot of community together just to do this work. So I'd love to hear more about what that's all been like to you.
Oh yeah, I was one of the things that we got hooked up with, thanks to Sacred Earth Solar Movement and Serena, who you saw in the film. She's actually my daughter's best friend. So we get to see her a lot at my house. Since we put that solar array in October of last year, we've offset 3 tons of carbon. The array itself has produced it's almost to 4,000 kilowatt hours in that time. My house only uses about between 35 and 38 kilowatt hours in a month. This thing is pumping out more than we actually, I saw my bill actually today, and I'm at negative $25. And my entire house, and it's wired, right? So I've got everything is smart now in my house. it's not even making a dent in what this array is pumping out. And we call it this, I mean, I wanna give you a little, it's a Haudenosaunee legend, that the reason we call it the sunflower array is that when Sky Woman fell to earth and landed on the turtle's back, before Brother Sun came to shine upon the earth, because she had to ask him, Creator, who was one of her children, knew that he needed to grow, so he made a sunflower. And the sunflower originally shone on things until Brother Sun got like the whole world. So I like to think of our solar array as being a sunflower. And it's like literally, every time I go by it, I'm like so excited. People in my community have all gone, where did you get that? How did you build it? Where is, like, how are you, what's the output? I'm very happy to tell them, right? Like, this thing is pumping out way more. We are literally like not wasting anything. And our bunkie is lit and it's warm. And we can be in there any time of year now. So we can have sweats if we want to all year round and have a warm place to change. Having that has just been a focal point in the community that people are constantly asking me, how did that happen? What's it doing? And so we're gonna sign that says Sunflower Solar Array, Sacred Solar, and we kind of like give information about how they can do it. I've actually had 5 people in the community message me going, how do I do this for my house? And because it's right in our front yard, like people go by it and they're like, that's amazing. Like people want these solutions. They want these alternatives. And having a hookup like Sacred Solar in our back pocket to tell people has been really, really helpful. And hopefully Melina and Sue can get a little bit more projects from that. Well, one of the projects we're doing actually in the next coming week, I believe over the summer, is they're solarizing one of our longhouses, the Sour Springs Longhouse. It's probably the most progressive one on the reserve. They're building a seed keeping place, so we can have our heritage seeds kept. And they're solarizing that community space so that they can always have power and you don't have to worry about the cost. Because hydro costs on the RAS, because we're in a remote area, remote for Southern Ontario, is really expensive. So this is really cut down on costs. It was an initial outlay of a lot of money, but we were able to get a grant from Indian Collective. Shout out to Indian Collective, they've been awesome for us. And that's another way to empower communities, right? Like, let's figure out alternative means that aren't from the government, that aren't from extractive industries, because they want to pump a lot of money into native communities. I call it the guilt money. That's what they want to do. Like, they're constantly trying to give money to communities because they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know what they've done. And this is their way of trying to like throw money at it to make the problem go away. Well, one of the reasons why I've always loved working in our silence is that we refuse to take government money. We refuse to take extraction money. And we figure out a way to fundraise in community with progressive organizations and unions, which are, basically organizations in the working class. So we are not doing government, we're not doing capitalist corporations, and we're just crowdfunding and fundraising from our own communities.
Maybe it's a good time to talk about how we're expanding. We are super excited. We could throw out the photos. When you saw the film, there was a beautiful drone shot. You might have noticed that there was this beautiful barn. So we've been dreaming about turning that into a fully accessible healing body wellness center. I'm going to show you these photos. These are our neighbors who are nesting in the barn. This is the barn. It was built, what, 1946? 1946. The crew in front there, as Terry was mentioning, we've really had a great experience with the Confess Church, who's made many years showing up for racial justice. It's a group of white people who really walk their talk when it comes to moving money from white people's pockets to Black, Indigenous people of color pockets. They crowdfunded for us when we went to Palestine, like, we raised $10,000 in a couple of days. And they have been on the ground getting really, really dirty. Like literally, you're gonna see some photos. The next photo is an example of, we decided to save money by cleaning up the barn ourselves before the builders come. And Terry had mentioned there was a bit of junk in there, but I didn't really look until a couple of days before organizing the first crew. And then it was kind of horrifying to see, this is the upstairs loft, and this is bad shit. Yeah. Kitchen shit of like 30 some years. It's very toxic, very dangerous to breathe in. So we had people who went up there in full hazmat gear with respirators. And it took crews of 3 people, remarkably little time. They were like big monsters. Like they went in there and they would spend like, it was 3 days, 3 to 4 hours shifts, 3 to 5 hours, I think, it took to clear out this barn. So that was the first job was just to push everything in a corner. And then we were able to, when the builder came with a dump trailer, shove it out the window. And I personally got involved for that. He made the mistake of not having a hazmat suit on. And I was like, the thickness of the, like literally feces in my ears. Like, it was so horrible. I stood under a garden hose for half an hour before I got in my car. But the next photo, you're going to see the change, the difference. This is what it looks like. This is going to be our, there's going to be 3 guest rooms in the back, so people will be able to stay overnight. It's going to be a big open space for ceremony and for gathering. We may even, if we have enough money, we'll put it in a second level so that we can also have like, more room. And we're sort of dreaming about those hanging chairs that you see in spas, because this is going to be, basically a spa. So the next photo looks at the progress downstairs. This is where the cows got fed. And we're envisioning here that the lounge area will be when people come out of the sauna. So we have a sauna. We have the lodge for sweats, but we also want to be able to have therapeutic healing. And this is where, when you come out of the sauna, you will have those, gorgeous chairs where you can just lay down and have a nap after. So this took, again, it took 3 work days of, 3 to 6 people carrying stuff into a dumpster and then digging up the manure, 30 pieces of manure. And the next photo you see what it looks like now. This is all like people like Serge and friends who helped us do this. And right now, as we speak, the people, foam people are in there, foam insulation. The next photo is, this was before, and it's going to be our office. Next to the back, the sauna will be behind there. It's going to be fully accessible to the upstairs with a ramp that goes up the middle of the building. And then the next photo is what it looks like now. You will eventually there will be an office there with a sink and a coffee maker. And, over there, the bull tent on the other side, where the bull used to live, and we're going to be putting massage and reiki tables in there. So people look at us really puzzled when we talk about this, and they're like kind of incredulous that we would dare to just make a spa. Like, why don't we get a spa? And why don't we deserve a spa?
And part of the whole idea is like to bring in healing practitioners from our communities, like, offer their services to people. And as a healing place, so many of our people have faced, criminalization through dissent. At Six Nations, we have active land reclamation areas going on where people have been literally thrown in jail for doing that. There's been a lot of violence around some of the land reclamation. People are traumatized, and I like to, one of the things that I've learned in working in the community the way I do, our people have been fighting for 500 years. There's a lot of trauma in our people. As the Haudenosaunee were probably the first people who had contact with Europeans, and we have the Truro Wampum as a result of that. In 1604, we met the Dutch and created a treaty with them. And so therefore always been in contact. First it was the Dutch, then it was the French, then it was the English, then it was the Americans. And over that course of time, all we've been doing has been in struggle and fighting. The first thing that happened to us was that smallpox came in and decimated 98% of our population. So right from the beginning, there was nothing but trauma and the loss of like 98% of our population. Like, I find that just horrific to think about. Then after that, we were fighting the French. Then after that, we were like struggling against then we had the American Revolution. And the Haudenosaunee are the recipients of the first American genocidal campaign. It was the Sullivan campaign in 1779, which literally burned us out of New York State, which is where our homeland is. So we were forced to be refugees in our own homelands. And people have never gotten over that. I really believe that there's so much trauma in our communities because of the ongoing processes of colonialism. So then after you're no longer fighting colonial things, then you're fighting oppression, because then the residential schools came, the Indian Act, all of those things cause trauma in a community. And so that's one of the reasons why disability justice and healing justice is really important. We are literally 7 generations in of trauma. And so my people believe very strongly in that the decisions that you do now affect 7 generations down the line. So if we want our next 7 generations to be healthy, we need to be looking at how we're healing ourselves. How do we go forward? How are we going to reclaim and keep our traditions alive, but also embrace the fact that we have nation, like we have neighbors from nations all over the world. And how do we be in a space and a place that accepts all of those things, but also carves out a space for ourselves. And so that's kind of like where I look at our next set of generations are going. But first we need to get some healing space in there. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very, very dedicated to having this healing lodge become more of a reality. Because it's literally, I look at it as respite from colonialism. Because we've been dealing with it for 500 years. And so I think that, you know, going forward, this is our next great project. Audrey and I are both, we're starting to look at what do we want to do after we stop. Being able to administer this and watch it blossom into something is kind of like where I see myself in the next 10 years. And I think that we're on track to do something really special here. And hope that maybe in a couple of years we come back and tell you what we're doing.
Could I chime back in?
Melina speak, and then, God, I had so many questions I want to talk to you about, but we're running short on time, so we'll let Melina speak and then open up for a couple of questions from the audience and including folks online. So, Melina, take it away.
Thanks, Jen. Sorry about that and the barking dog. Yeah, similar to what Audrey was just saying, the point that I was trying to make earlier was around trauma and how it's so important for our communities to heal from trauma because of the intergenerational trauma that all of us have experienced, being Indigenous peoples, being BIPOC peoples. You know, myself, I'm the first of my family to not attend residential schools. My dad and all of my aunts and uncles went to residential school. And that's, you know, such a huge trauma that our communities are still feeling and reeling from, and then also trying to heal from. But there's not a lot of healing spaces. A lot of our communities have been Christianized, Catholicized, and that continues, in my opinion, the cycle of colonialism and sometimes trauma with living in those colonial values that are not Indigenous. And so when we're indigenizing disability justice or indigenizing healing justice, it's making sure that we have safe spaces for healing and also understanding how our nervous systems even react. You know, as a young activist, I wasn't taught any of those skill sets in my 20s and my 30s. I had to learn them in my late 30s and 40s after I became bedridden from 20 years of organizing, because I wasn't taught how to regulate my nervous system. And so I think it's so important that not only do we have people on the ground and like what was said, where we're taught to be these warriors that have no limits. We should be like Superman or Superwoman or super person, where we have to be these warriors where we don't actually tend and care for ourselves or for those closest around us. And so similar to how we're actually a part of the altar, we're not part of a sacrifice, you know, and we shouldn't be the sacrificial lambs continually to continue this work. How do we bring healing alongside? And so when Audrey and Terry approached me to help solarize through Sacred Earth, the Healing Lodge, it just made so much sense for us to ensure that we are creating safe spaces of healing, because even within healing lodges, you know, a lot of us who are immunocompromised or have visible or invisible disabilities can't go into lodge. Even now, myself, I haven't been back into a lodge other than the lodge that No More Silence runs because of people being willing to take COVID tests, you know. And so a lot of us aren't even able to go into our ceremonial spaces because there's, you know, the ableism that continues to be pervasive. And so also for the front line, you know, so Sacred Earth Solar also works with frontline communities, and we give out healing justice grants and distribute healing justice for people coming off of frontline impacted, you know, basically being brutalized and criminalized by police. And so how do we support those who are putting their bodies on the front line? How do we support them coming off of the front lines? And a lot of times there is a complete lack of recognition for that sacrifice and a complete lack of support for that sacrifice, that people, you know, leave their jobs and then they leave and they come back injured a lot of the times from going through that brutalization of police, and there's no supports for them. And so that's a part of also of the healing justice and the disability justice, to acknowledge that these types of supports are needed for frontline community members, because a lot of times it's very patronizing. And, you know, myself, where people would be like, oh, you're so strong, you're so strong. And it's like, but what about when we're weak? What about when we need support? And that was just not there when I was bedridden 4 years ago. And it gave me a really big perspective shift of like, who am I in community with? Am I just in community with people that are there when I'm just strong, are there when I'm vocal, or am I in community when I am weak, when I can't advocate for myself, when I can't lift a cup of tea, when I can't dry my own hair, when I can't put a t-shirt on? You know, who is that in our community, and how do we create those communities of care? Because that's the kind of community that I want to be a part of.
Medicine tonight. So we're at our time, but I do want to give the audience just a couple of a few minutes to ask some questions if you would like. Anyone here in the room or online have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, first, is this one?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. First, I just want to say thank you for visiting DC and for being here. I've received so much and I really appreciate it. Okay, there's two different topics I'm really curious about, so I'll just maybe throw them both out quickly. One is the topic of crib time, disability time, and how it may or may not be related or connected to Indigenous or Native time. And the other topic is how to heal or cultivate a relationship with land when disability kind of necessitates living in an urban area because of needing access to public transportation and doctors and medical care and all that. So anyway, those are just a couple of topics that came to mind for me.
In terms of because I lived in the city for 40 years before I went back home. And one of the things that I found is that finding green space just to sit in and kind of commune with the trees that are there, the plants that are there. And like if you're like in Toronto, there's a lot of squirrels and raccoons and things like that, the animals. And just to be able to sit there for a little bit, even if it's like, it's too cold or whatever, just to be out in something that's green is really, for me, that was hugely important. One of the nice things about Toronto is that there is a lot of green space, it's very treaty, and we're out on a lake. So you can go down to the lake shore and be kind of in areas where it's still a little wild. can at least pretend you're in a wild space for a brief amount of time. And for me, those were really impactful, like just even if it was like a little pot of like garden space behind a condo. Finding those spaces is really, really important. I find it really interesting the concept of Indian time and disability time, because we do know that when people are disabled, they do require more time to get to something. Things need to start maybe a little later while you're getting everybody gathered in. Native people, like one of the things that we always say on the res is that if something is scheduled for 7:30, you might as well not even bother turning up until 22, 20 to 8 or so, because it's not going to start until at least 10 to 8. We have this whole saying in our ceremonies that things start when they need to start. So that's kind of how we try to like sort of say, well, we're gonna start around here, but whether we're on time, like, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We just try to go with the flow.
Critter camp was one of the things that was articulated in the healing, in the listening sessions that we did, that people wanted, and that we will be able to do, and where we feel really lucky that Six Nations and Mountain Lodge is only an hour and a half from Toronto. So it will mean, I know the community is really anxious to come, and it's expensive because it means renting an accessible van, and COVID made that incredibly hard. I guess people got rid of the fleets of vehicles that they had, and now there's very, very few. Like last summer we had to book, and this summer we had to book all the weekends. We had to book them 2 months ago to even get to reserve a van that can accommodate a power chair. Never mind, you know, a bigger bus that could bring a few power chairs and a few people. So it is challenging, but that is the opportunity that we have, that we're, and why we're having guest rooms, so that people can stay overnight and to make that actually happen for more people. If Melina maybe wants to add to that.
I didn't catch the first question, but the last question even, I had to go on medical leave and I was pretty housebound. And one thing that really helped me was actually a plant. You know, if you can't leave the house and you can't go to that green space, and I agree with Terry, find that little green space, that tree, that rose bush that you can sit with. But for me, it was a plant, and it was just tending to a tobacco plant in my house, and, you know, watering it and singing to it and talking to it and thanking it for the offerings that it would give me to be able to, like, you know, grow my own offerings to land. So I think it sometimes can be even just plants within your house if you're housebound. It really helped me during my medical leave.
I actually have a traditional tobacco plant, a ceremonial plant for my ancestral homelands at home. And so that like really just gives me a moment of calm, living in, you know, a high-rise building in the middle of DC. So I'd say we can take one more question. Anyone else in the room or online have a question? Anyone? All right, well then, thank you so much for being here tonight, Wado, and for bearing with us on all our technical challenges, and for joining online. As Audrey mentioned earlier, both of those films are available to view on YouTube. We will also, in the next couple of weeks, put up a much more polished video of this event that will include the films in them for everyone to see. Oh, and we've got a question back
I couldn't remember. Yeah. Am I loud enough for everyone? Or do I need to mic? Okay, all right.
I do have one question. I'm sorry, I forgot. I was when I was watching. With the sweats, do you have anything, like, how do you accommodate also for Two-Spirit folks? Like, because I know that there are often gender roles in ceremonial spaces. We don't have, there's no dress code, there's no rigidity around where you want to sit or how you want to sit. It's basically, you let us know what you need and you come in. And we are gonna plan times two-spirit sweats, exclusive times two-spirit sweats, so that folks can just be among themselves.
One of the reasons why Wanda was really useful in this process is that as an elder, she doesn't believe in a lot of the really restrictive gender roles. She also is a Harvard oceanist. So her whole thing is that if you need to sweat, you need to sweat. There like a lot of, some of the traditions, especially in Canada, among the Cree and the Ojibwe, are that you have to be I think it's 4 days sober. And sometimes that's not possible.
Yeah.
That's just not possible. People need sweats. And if that's the case, one is like, as long as you're healthy and you can take it in, come in. And one of the things that we have found too is that the lodge, it heats up really well and efficiently. So, and we open the door if it's too much for people. Like we're really trying to be mindful of what people need in the space at the time they're sweating. And so we try to make it so that, you know, they're able to like access air, they're able to like get out if they need to. All of those things that I've been in other sports before where the person leading it was really restricted. You had to sit here, you had to have a skirt on. Men could come in as much, like with as little as they wanted, but women had to be fully covered almost. Like I found it really restrictive. You had to sit in certain spots, and if you were disabled in any way, trying to get in and out of the sweat when you have to sit on the ground is really hard. So one of the things of ours, we have benches, we have little benches you can sit on if you don't want to sit on the floor. There's places that there's a higher bench, but it gets really hot up there, so we try not to put people up there. And we just try to make it so that you're accessing ceremony with your needs being met. And I think that that's really also part of one of the biggest teachings that I got from one is that you meet people where they are and you offer ceremony regardless of where. So I think that that's kind of how we guide ourselves.
And since we didn't say it explicitly, like we are trying to address across disabilities, like a diversity of disabilities. So it isn't only folks with mobility issues. There was a blind woman when we had to sweat with all the participants from the listening sessions. There was someone who had been turned away from the lodge in Toronto, just told no, you're too big a liability because you can't see, you could fall into the rocks. And she was heartbroken, you know, and she was so grateful to be able to have experienced this sweat with Wanda. It changed her life. She said it changed her life. And we had an aide who was there for the whole day just to be with her and just to completely focus and be her whatever she needed. And we have folks who have PTSD who might need a crack of light, you know, where there's elders who will like completely not allow light and say it's not a real ceremony, it's like a sort of light. No, like if people need a light, why don't we let people bring a flashlight in that house? You know, like it's about, and as long as you come with love in your heart and respect for the medicines, for the ceremony, one is very humble in that she does not think, she's like, if the creator has brought you here, then you're here for the reason. It's not for me to decide. So that's beautiful.
I think too.
Melina, would you like to respond?
Yeah, quick. So my dad taught me, my dad was hidden from residential schools till he was 9, 10, and he was only taught in Cree and taught like our stories and language and cultures and values only in Cree. My kukum and most of my grandparents didn't speak English. So it's unfortunate with colonialism, things have become very gendered and very binary. And my dad says that that wasn't the case previous to colonialism, that there was actually up to 5 genders in like a spectrum and a diversity of ways of being in our community as Nihiao people. And so even that our spiritual people were two-spirited, that's where the term comes from, that you could embody a multitude of ways of being. And so those were actually our spiritual people a lot of the time. And so it's just really unfortunate how colonialism has impacted even our ceremonial spaces. And so I think that's a part of the reclaiming of ways of being within ceremony and ensuring that all our people, all our relatives, our two-spirit relatives are included and respected and feel safe within our ceremonies, because ultimately they were the ones that had led our nations in the past. And so I think, I don't know if people know that, but that's what I've been taught, that's the case, that our people were led by our ceremonial people and two-spirited people in the past. And so I feel like it's coming back full circle, and that's a part of decolonizing.
Wow, thank you so much. So thank you to Audrey, Terry, Melina, Wanda, Angela for dancing, Billy, our ASL interpreter, and to the Crushing Colonialism crew here is here. We have Garden at the welcome table. We have Nika over here at this middle computer, and then we have AC at our other computer. So, so thank you to all of you for coming tonight and for watching and supporting. Please donate if you're able, sign up for the email list, take the magazine, do all those good things, and follow us on social media. Check out our website, crushingcolonialism.org. So thank you. Bye.